Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Before I Go podcast. I hope you are doing well and that your 2022 is off to a great start. One of the things that I do every year in January is to have my annual mammogram. Prior to the appointment, the hospital called me so I could pre-register. I had never gone through that before. Usually I fill out forms online, but this time I had to speak to a real person in order to pre-register. During the phone call, the woman on the phone asked me a series of questions, verifying my date of birth, my address, insurance, and so on. She verified my emergency contacts and my marital status. She asked me if I was still divorced, and I said yes. She then asked me if I preferred the term divorced or single. I hesitated before I answered because I had never been asked that question, and honestly, I didn't even understand the question. What difference did it make? She sensed my hesitation and went on to explain that the reason why she was asking was because since there's such a stigma attached to being divorced, that some people would rather be labeled as single. I was like, okay, well, that's very thoughtful of you to ask, but I've been divorced for a while, so it doesn't really matter to me. You can keep it as divorced. She said she just wanted to check, and then we moved on. But it got me to thinking, is there really still a stigma associated with being divorced? If there is, why? Honestly, I actually never saw it that way. I mean, I suppose I understand how some people see it as a personal failure and how in generations past people were meant to marry and stay married until death parts them. But the fact is, almost 50% of all marriages in the United States will end in divorce or separation. Researchers estimate that 41% of all first marriages end in divorce, 60% of second marriages end in divorce, and 73% of all third marriages end in divorce. More people are getting divorced than are staying married, so why the stigma? My first marriage ended after 5 months with an annulment. My second marriage ended after 8 years in a divorce. After my second husband and I divorced, he went on to get married and divorced 2 more times. I'm still trying to figure out the reason for the stigma. The word stigma is defined as a set of negative and often unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something. So is it only a stigma because other people say it is? That's the part that bothers me the most. We have got to stop defining how we feel about ourselves based on how others feel about us or perceive us. You don't know my life. When I decided to leave my first marriage, I was 25 and pregnant with my first child. The first lawyer that I went to asked me if I really wanted to end the marriage because of the stigma associated with being a single mother. I quickly found another lawyer and had the marriage annulled. Even then, I was not concerned with anything other than what I had to do for myself. I'm not trying to make light of divorce. The process of divorce sucks, and I would not wish it on my worst enemy, and I mean that. If you can make it work, by all means, do that. I couldn't, and if I'm being honest, I didn't want to. And even though in my opinion it was the best option for me, that doesn't mean it wasn't difficult. I mean, from a logistical standpoint, it wasn't difficult at all. The only thing that we jointly owned, for lack of a better word, was our daughter. We didn't own a home. My car was in my name, his car was in his name, and we had separate bank accounts. We had to be physically separated for 12 months and then sign some papers. However, from an emotional standpoint, it was terrible, but in the end, it was the best thing I could have ever done. I remember watching the movie The Witches of Eastwick in 1987. It starred Jack Nicholson, Cher, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon. Loved that movie. In the movie, Jack Nicholson had a line that I heard, and it has stayed with me until this very day. He said, and I quote, "When a woman unloads a husband or a husband unloads a woman, however it happens, death, desertion, divorce, the 3 Ds, when that happens, a woman blooms. She blossoms like flowers, like fruit. She is ripe." I first heard that in 1987. And it had an impact, but I still went on to get married in 1989 and then again in 1993. Is there any truth to the quote? Perhaps. I know that after I got divorced in 2001, I bought my first home, I published a novel, my salary increased exponentially, and I went on to raise 2 very successful children. I see it happen with a lot of women. When they're forced to do things on their own, they rise to the challenge in a big way. So the next time you see a strong woman, just know that being strong was her only option. Am I advocating for women to leave their husbands or their relationships so they can blossom? Absolutely not. Some women have marriage down pat. They know how to function within that dynamic. They are blossoming in their marriages. I can never figure it out. I like having my own money and I like having the bed to myself. And I see no reason to attach a stigma to that. So yes, mark me down as divorced. I'm cool with that. Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening. But before I go, let me share this with you from an unknown source. Don't base your decisions on the advice of those who don't have to deal with the results. I'll see you next time.